A teacher quits because she thinks she has married money, then loses the money before summer even starts. So her classroom becomes a cash machine. This is Bad Teacher, where Elizabeth Halsey turns one middle school into a battlefield for cash, surgery, romance, and revenge. And somehow the students are not even the most chaotic people in the building. The movie opens at John Adams Middle School, where the staff is wrapping up the year with a kind of cheerful assembly that makes everyone clap. Because they are supposed to, Principal Wally celebrates the teachers, the charity events, and the school spirit, then brings up Elizabeth Halsey, who is leaving after only 1 year. Everyone applauds like she is a beloved educator. But Elizabeth treats the goodbye like a parole hearing. She gives a fake emotional speech about missing the school, while making it very clear she is thrilled to never teach again. Her plan is simple: marry her wealthy fiancé, Mark, disappear into comfort, and never again pretend to care about 7th grade reading levels. But the dream collapses the moment she gets home. Mark is packed up, his mother is waiting like a human alarm system, and the family accountant has apparently figured out Elizabeth is not exactly marrying for love. Elizabeth tries every emergency tactic: affection, outrage, a birthday surprise, even a fake pregnancy. And when those fail, she agrees to a prenup too late. Mark takes back the ring, ends the engagement, and leaves her with the worst possible future employment. So after one triumphant farewell, Elizabeth walks right back into jams, where the teachers greet her with painfully sincere sympathy, especially Amy Squirrel, the relentlessly upbeat teacher who somehow makes kindness feel like a threat. Elizabeth explains the breakup with lies and half-truths, then reconnects with Lynn, a timid teacher who actually wants to be her friend. Lynn listens while Elizabeth reveals her new plan. She believes a cosmetic upgrade will help her compete with richer, shinier women, which means she needs money fast. Elizabeth's first day back in class tells the students everything they need to know. A student brings homemade cookies. Elizabeth dismisses them, ignores the kids, puts on a movie, and turns teaching into paid indoor parking for herself. The students are confused, but Elizabeth is not confused at all. She is conserving energy for the only subject she actually cares about: escape. At lunch, gym teacher Russell tries to flirt with her, and he is rough around the edges but straightforward. Elizabeth rejects him instantly because he is a co-worker, and more importantly, because he is not rich. Then Amy corners her with school procedures and polite judgment, and Elizabeth realizes she has met the one person in the building determined to monitor her chaos with a smile. The real target appears when Elizabeth finds Scott Delacorte wandering the school. Scott is the new substitute teacher, handsome, sweet, awkward, and wearing a watch expensive enough to change her entire mood when he mentions his family is. In the watch business, Elizabeth's attention sharpens. Scott is still hung up on an ex named Jordan. But Elizabeth hears only one thing: possible money. Her plan needs a price tag. So Elizabeth visits a surgeon and gets a consultation that is handled with all the dignity this movie can manage. The doctor explains the procedure and the cost, and the total lands near $10,000. Elizabeth does not have it. Her old fiancé will not give it, and her roommate situation is already humiliating. When she asks around, Lynn can offer only a tiny loan and sympathy. So Elizabeth looks at school life differently, not as a job, but as a series of small revenue streams. The 7th grade car wash gives her the first big opening. The students believe they're raising money for a Springfield trip, while Elizabeth sees wet sponges, parental guilt, and an extremely convenient cash box. She flirts with Scott while organizing the event, hints that she is not ready for romance because she is still healing, and lets him think her distance is emotional depth. The car wash becomes a runaway success, partly because Elizabeth turns the event into something louder and flashier than any school fundraiser should be. Amy suspects the money is not all going where it should, and she brings the accusation to Principal Wally. But Elizabeth has already protected herself with popularity, parent praise, and a stack of impressive totals. Wally sees a teacher who raised thousands. Amy sees a thief, and Elizabeth walks away with her surgery fund much healthier. Amy's frustration grows as Scott drifts closer to Elizabeth, while Elizabeth pretends to be vulnerable and dedicated. During parent night, she turns neglect into a business model. Parents worry their kids need attention, and Elizabeth collects cash for supposed extra help. She plays the room like a con artist at a bake sale, smiling just enough to seem invested, but always steering the conversation toward donations. Scott, meanwhile, is being courted by Amy, who gives him a meaningful book and presents herself as the wholesome choice. Elizabeth catches the vibe immediately, then privately deals with her students in the bluntest possible way, including pushing ambitious kids toward bizarre life advice and treating emotional problems like scheduling errors. The school's winter festivities reveal something strange. Elizabeth is terrible at the job, but not completely blind to the kids. A lovesick student named Garrett performs an embarrassing song for popular chase, and Elizabeth recognizes the disaster before he does. She tells him the truth in her own harsh language. He is aiming at someone who values image over substance, and he needs to stop advertising his pain. It is not gentle, but it is almost useful. At a bar later, Elizabeth reluctantly helps Lynn talk to men, and for a moment her selfishness turns into accidental coaching. Russell is there too, unimpressed by her act and amused by the fact that she keeps pretending not to notice him. But the night becomes a turning point when Scott performs a song for Amy and makes it painfully obvious that he likes her. Elizabeth finally realizes her rich substitute teacher fantasy may be dead. Then Lynn mentions the state test bonus. The teacher whose class scores highest gets $5,700. Suddenly, Elizabeth's heart grows 3 sizes for standardized testing. The next morning, her classroom transforms. Movies vanish, books open, quizzes appear, and the students discover that Miss Halsey can actually teach when there is a cash prize attached. She is intense, impatient, and openly motivated by money. But the class starts learning. Elizabeth drills them on literature, rewards answers, punishes laziness, and even weaponizes gym class dodgeball advice into a lesson about focus. The kids improve, but Elizabeth wants certainty, not effort. Amy notices the sudden personality transplant and becomes even more suspicious. Scott mistakes Elizabeth's new intensity for passion, which flatters her just enough to keep her game alive. But the students' practice scores are still not where Elizabeth needs them. So she chooses the most Elizabeth solution possible, cheating with extra steps. She calls the state testing office pretending to be a reporter, lures a test official named Carl into a meeting, and pokes at his vanity until he agrees to help. Elizabeth needs a copy of the exam before the students take it. Carl is defensive, awkward, and easier to manipulate than a school vending machine. When he will not simply hand it over, she turns the evening into a staged seduction, gets him drinking, distracts him with music, and waits until he is too out of it to protect the test materials. The scene stays comic and uncomfortable because Elizabeth is not following a plan so much as improvising a felony with eyeliner. Once Carl is incapacitated, Elizabeth takes what she came for, the exam, with the answers in hand. She prepares her class so perfectly that the miracle looks like hard work. The test results arrive, and Jams is stunned. Elizabeth's students land near the top of the state. Wally praises her dedication. The staff applauds, and Elizabeth receives the bonus that brings her surgery fund within reach. Amy watches the celebration like she is seeing a crime scene with balloons. For Elizabeth, the win also creates a new complication. She has to chaperone the Springfield trip with Scott, which should be the perfect romantic setting. Except Amy is still circling before the trip. Amy's own plans get derailed when Elizabeth quietly manipulates events around a student, an apple, and a convenient mess, leaving Amy unable to go. Elizabeth takes her place beside Scott, on the bus and at the historic exhibits. Scott keeps trying to be sweet, while Elizabeth keeps trying to convert sweetness into commitment. But Amy does not give up. She investigates Carl and learns that the supposed reporter who met him was Elizabeth in disguise. Carl remembers enough to confirm something went wrong, and Amy finally has the thread she has been waiting for. In Springfield, Elizabeth and Scott share an awkward private encounter that proves their chemistry is mostly in Scott's imagination. He is polite, excited, and strange, while Elizabeth realizes that being close to him may not be worth the money. Still, she plays along because the surgery goal is almost finished and because quitting a scheme before the finish line is not her style. Then Scott's phone accidentally records enough to expose his night with Elizabeth to Amy. Amy confronts her with a full list of accusations: the fake teaching, the stolen test, the manipulation, and the relationship mess. This time Amy has momentum, and she tells Elizabeth there will be a meeting with Wally. For once, Elizabeth looks boxed in. If Amy proves the test theft, Elizabeth loses the bonus, the job, the surgery, and maybe her freedom. So Elizabeth does what she always does under pressure. She finds someone else's weakness and turns it into a weapon. She sends Russell on a strange mission, then tracks down Carl again through his car. Carl panics when confronted, and Elizabeth corners him with evidence of the night he would rather keep hidden. She does not need him to love the truth. She just needs him afraid of the consequences. Carl is forced to change his story, and Elizabeth walks into the school meeting with a counterattack ready. Amy presents her case, but the witness now denies the important part. Suddenly, the investigation looks shaky. Wally wants the situation to go away, and Elizabeth leans into wounded innocence. She argues that teachers should not be punished for successful students, while carefully making Amy look obsessive and unstable. Then Elizabeth adds the final trap. A drug-sniffing dog is brought in, and the search redirects suspicion away from her. Amy insists she is innocent, but evidence appears where it absolutely should not be. Wally and the others believe Amy has a serious problem. Amy melts down in disbelief, and Elizabeth survives by turning her accuser into the scandal. It is wildly unethical, deeply unfair, and exactly the kind of victory Elizabeth understands. By the end of the school year, the farewell assembly has flipped. Amy is leaving the district, smiling through humiliation and pretending the transfer is an exciting new opportunity. Elizabeth watches the enemy she framed disappear, but the win feels different from her first day. She has the money, the bonus, the social power, and a surgery appointment waiting. Yet something about the year has shifted her priorities. Russell, who has seen through her from the start, offers support without worshiping her. He knows she is selfish, messy, and allergic to sincerity, but he also seems to like the person underneath the performance. Elizabeth asks why he even teaches, and Russell admits it is what he is good at. Not glamorous, not rich, but real. That lands more than she expects, because Elizabeth has spent the whole movie chasing a fake version of success, only to discover she can influence people when she actually pays attention. The next school year arrives, and Elizabeth is still at jams, but she has skipped the surgery. She tells Lynn she realized she did not need it, tossing away the obsession that drove nearly every bad decision. She is not magically transformed into a saint. That would be a different movie, but she is less desperate to rebuild herself for some rich man's approval. She and Russell have settled into a strange, teasing connection, the kind where neither one pretends the other is perfect. He is still a gym teacher with chaos energy. She is still Elizabeth, but the honesty between them works better than her polished scams ever did. And in the final joke, the school has somehow made Elizabeth a guidance counselor, which is either a disaster or the most accurate use of her talents. She may not give gentle advice, but she sees insecurity, status games, crushes, and bad decisions faster than anyone in the building. Bad Teacher ends with Elizabeth not exactly redeemed, but redirected. She cheats, lies, manipulates, and wins more than she deserves. Yet the year forces her to drop the fantasy that money will solve her life. If you enjoyed watching Elizabeth turn a middle school into a crime comedy with lesson plans, tap the like button like it is the only bonus Wally remembered to approve, and subscribe before Amy files another report. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.